All right, we should be live. Welcome back to the Tone Vase YouTube channel. I can't wait for this interview right here or discussion. I don't like calling these interviews, man. It's just a back and forth. And I want to welcome to the Tone Vase channel the one Vortex. Dude, I don't even know if you've ever been on my channel because when I launched my channel, you were still on the World Crypto Network and we were doing a lot of cross content, but I used to come on there. I'm not sure you've been on this channel, other
If
than
I
like the epic streams, like the Having stream and like the Bcash Fork stream, but not like a one-on-one, right?
no, I've been on the ceremonial streams, correct, but no,
Right,
I don't think any type of one-on-one. You were most commonly coming on my Bitcoin news show.
right. You were still running the Bitcoin news show. Man, Vortex and I go back a long way. We're going to talk a little bit about that history here. We got a lot to cover. We're going to try to get this done in 2 hours. Vortex, I'm going to do screen share of your Twitter profile for people to follow. In the meantime, I'm going to go check that everything is streaming and if we're streaming on X. So do a intro of yourself and feel free to elaborate because I'll let you know when I'm like back checking all the tech.
Yeah, first of all, Tone, thanks, man, so much for having me. Yeah, me and Tone do go way back. We got into Bitcoin around the same time, but for different reasons back in 2012 or so. But yeah, let's just do a quick intro. First, want to apologize for the flickering of my virtual background here. It's a little bit strange.
You were in before me. I wasn't in that early. Just as an honest correction and future potential wrench attacks. I was not in that early.
Yeah, so we around the same time back then, 2012, 2013, and
I was paying attention to it, but I was not in the Bitcoin world.
yeah. Yeah, so I go by the pseudonym Vortex, as you can see there, which has always been my gamer tag. That's where that comes from. I'm a software engineer specializing in C# and web application development. Have built a career now of over 20 plus years in that field. So I got into Bitcoin, like I said, around the same time as Tone, 2012, 2013. But I'm most well known for my podcast that went for about over 5 years, which is the Bitcoin News Show. Where we discussed had a whole panel of people on every single week to talk about the news about Bitcoin, because back then there just wasn't a whole lot of coverage of Bitcoin. So this was way back in the day, started in 2015. But I'm probably also well known for my proponent of being a big proponent of the UASF in 2017. I was a big vocal proponent of that. And yeah, so just like back then, once again, I'm here to tell everybody, just like I did in 2017, that there is no emergency. The sky is actually not falling, and everybody can and probably should relax a little bit. So just to preface, I'm on this show. I'm not endorsing any spamming company. I have no affiliation with any spamming company. Like I said, I'm an independent developer that has a 20 plus year career. Plus, I got into Bitcoin around 2012. So I don't actually need to be paid by anybody. And to be crystal clear, again, I'm not endorsing or condoning any non-financial data usage. I'm simply accepting that as a censorship-resistant system that Bitcoin is, it can and will be used for cases that not everyone agrees on. And I don't care whether you run knots or core. That's up to you. Obviously, in my opinion, everybody should be able to run what they want to run. So regardless, but we've never had anything like the UASF in 2026 here today. It is completely different than the 2017, and we'll get into that. But because this is completely new and different, regardless of the outcome, this will be yet another important lesson for both Bitcoiners and the market abroad to learn as the world learns more and more about what Bitcoin is. And in my opinion, Bitcoin is freedom money. So one final point before we get into the discussion further is I just want to make a quick point about Bitcoin derangement syndrome, folks. BDS, Bitcoin derangement syndrome. This is pretty important to start out with because Bitcoin is never going to be perfect, guys. Like let's admit this. It's never going to be what everybody wants it to be all the time forever. It's important for people to understand what Bitcoin derangement syndrome is so that they can understand what it looks like when they see it. Because basically, it's when some prominent person in the Bitcoin community thinks that they are so important that they can then change Bitcoin against the will of the rest of the network. So, and through that process, they eventually pretty much go insane with their ego attaching the outcome to their very identity. And I've seen it happen several times now, which is why I was able to call out Mechanics actions over a year ago. And both Luke and Mechanic seem to be going down that path. And historically, it has never ended well for the people trying to change Bitcoin because the minority do not rule the majority in Bitcoin. And the majority is always the status quo, since that by definition is the default state of Bitcoin. And yeah, go ahead, Tony. Back to you.
I was muted. But just like the Trump derangement syndrome, like people just don't see it, right?
Bitcoin derangement syndrome, not Trump. I think you said Trump derangement syndrome.
No, I know, I did. I said just like the Trump derangement syndrome, people just like they wouldn't see it, right? And even though right now I am very, very unhappy with Trump, like I'm like shit. I'm basically regretting voting for the guy in round 3. But I don't have Trump derangement syndrome. I'm just really unhappy with what he's doing, right? It's not that I'm unhappy because it's Trump. I'm unhappy because of what he actually has
and we
done.
don't want to bring politics into this one, into this one. But yeah, I understand where you're coming from, Tony.
But that's the difference, right? Like people hating on a person just because it's that person versus actually looking into the policies and the actions and what is happening on the ground in order to make an informed decision.
That's a part of it.
That's basically.
But the thing is that what I define Bitcoin derangement syndrome is not the people and the plebs, responding, but it's actually the people in charge. So, Mechanic, Luke, Roger, CSW. These are the people that actually.
Calling them in charge is. I like to refer to.
I didn't say in charge. Just prominent.
No. You just no. That's the thing, right? You use the word the 3 people in charge, which is I don't like to use that term.
I don't want to use that either. The 3 people, the 3 people that it happened to before these.
Right. So I call it the 3 bus drivers. So these are the 3 people driving the bus. It is Luke, Mechanic, and Crater are driving the bus, and so many people are getting on this bus or these 3 buses, and it's mostly just on Twitter, right? Like outside of Twitter,
correct.
This is not happening. So at the end, we're going to discuss like how extensive is this, bubble. All right, so let's begin with. I think we should begin with history. I like chronological order of things. And I'm going to go back to screen share real quick. And I just want to point out, those that are interested in the history, on my YouTube channel, if you go to playlists, I know there's like 100 playlists. Most of these are actually not public. These are private. But on the public side of the playlists, there will be one for the user-activated soft fork of 20. There was my debates with Roger and all that other stuff. I should maybe combine them at this point. There is a UASF playlist somewhere. There it is. Here's the UASF playlist. And this is the history Vortex. You're going to be on here in a couple of episodes. Right here, Bitcoin News, number 42. This is probably myself being a guest on Vortex's show. So the history is all there. Okay? For what happened in the user-activated soft fork, and what positions we all took. Myself, you, Jimmy Song, Thomas Hunt. I have an episode here from John Light. I think this was an excellent one. The Francis recently talked about this. I got to put that Montreal recording that I did. So it's all here for the record. And this is one of the reasons why I came back to cover this. At first it was, hey, I want to understand what is happening between knots and core. So I wanted to do a few episodes with Jimmy Song and a few guests to understand what's going on. This is why the first 2 episodes of Knots versus Core playlist, this is this one here, the one that we're in now. If I go to my homepage, this playlist here, listed as the first playlist, basically, second playlist, sorry. Health's more important, which is deteriorating for me. The first 2 episodes of this playlist were Adam Back and then Luke Dash-Jure. Okay? And the reason why they were my first guests, Adam Back and Luke Dash, is because I consider them 2 as the most knowledgeable people, one on the core side and one on the knot side. So I went out of my way for the episodes 1 and episode 2 to try to find the biggest experts on one side versus the other. And then from there, by the time we hit, say, I don't know, episode 5, I already knew, like I already like researched this enough by episode 5, like right after merch came on. So that means one of each, right? Bob Barnett was my other super respected person in order to present the knots reason for why he's pro knots, and he may or may not be BIP110. We're still not sure. And then after merch came on, I'm like, holy shit. Okay, I kind of have a really good understanding now of what is going on. Why is this Twitter majority acting so crazy, like the Bitcoin derangement syndrome, as you just explained? And then I'm like, maybe I'm not giving them a good enough chance. Maybe I should bring on another person to explain knots, another technical expert, another personality that I respect over my 10 plus years in Bitcoin. And there weren't any more. Like, it was like Luke and Bob Barnett. And then we had Canute on, who was like pro knots, but he's more of a talking head like myself and yourself. Well, you're more technical than him, but more like myself. Giacomo was way more neutral back then when we had him than he is now. Parker was pretty neutral as well. And then to my reluctance to bring on Chris Guida, that's when everything fell off the rails and I lost my fucking shit, because this was the next best expert to present knots, and I had to. I was very disrespectful, and I think he's an idiot.
He was disrespectful too. Just understand, he was a bit disrespectful there too as well, and especially the confidence that he exuded in being completely technically incorrect on a lot of his viewpoints also was very off-putting.
Right. It was the anyway, and that's it. And now I keep asking people, show me an expert worth interviewing from the not side, and crickets. They don't exist. Everyone's saying Matthew Crowder. I'm like, Jesus Christ, why the hell would I have him on the show?
No, he's not a
at this point. I wanted to have Crowder on in the very beginning, but hell no, I'm not bringing him on. I'd like I was like joking. I'd rather bring Craig Wright and Roger Ver on to. I'm really curious what they think about this. Like, I'm actually honestly curious on their opinions on what the hell is going on, because I think that would be a lot more interesting to me than sitting here screaming back and forth with Crowder.
Well, I definitely have a lot to talk about too, Tone. So
all right, so let's jump in. Okay, lessons from the user-activated soft fork of 2017, and how do you remember it? What happened? And how are these lessons being completely, misunderstood for the soft fork of today? Floor is yours. I'm going to try to shut up.
Well, it's just because this time it really is like entirely different in 2017. This is entirely different from 2017 because the UASF direction is basically inverted. So 2017 UASF activated something Core already coded. In 2026, UASF is trying to override Core's own deliberate decision. So before the NYA coalition created that BTC1 fork with Jeff Garzik, right? Like that hostile replacement for Core's entire code base and development process. So one more time, that BTC1 client was created by Garzik and from the NYA coalition that literally created a hostile replacement for Core's entire code base and development process. If it gained adoption, Core's repo would effectively be sidelined. So, 110, is via knots, it's structurally different because, knots is just a downstream patch set on top of Core, not a replacement. So, running knots with stricter op return rules doesn't replace Core. It does apply, some additional restrictions that could possibly pressure Core into possibly adopting those, but they've already said why, given technical reasons, why that's not a good idea. But the development authority still stays with Core either way, whether this succeeds or whether it doesn't succeed. The market is a lot bigger now and more mature than it was. So the market is much more likely to adopt the status quo that they have all bought into already. So, like, for example, institutional players, they have zero appetite for fork drama, and would almost certainly side with Chorus Chain. There is people think that, for example, that the price has something to do with 110 and knots right now and core version 30. It absolutely does not. It has nothing to do with that. Nothing of that is reflected in the price. For the what's being reflected in the price right now is the fact that Bitcoin trades like a tech stock, because the tech bros from 2015 and on all bought into Bitcoin, and now it correlates with the NASDAQ and all these tech stocks. But that won't be that way forever, right? So people need to zoom out a little bit and understand that for the most part, this particular UASF really is a nothing burger for the most part, because it's nothing like it was in 2017. We're not fighting all these corporations or anything like that. We're simply fighting for a little bit more, fighting to define Bitcoin a little bit more than what it was before. And again, freedom money, right? That's what's important here. That's what the stand that I'm taking, is making sure that people understand that Bitcoin needs to be a neutral ledger. And that is just extremely important. I can go into more detail, but I'll have you respond.
No. I got follow-up questions, because we didn't actually you didn't actually get to the the lessons learned from BIP148.
Oh, I would like to say the lesson. If I would like to say the lesson, if that's okay, real quick. So the lesson, personally for me, is the lesson from SegWit2x isn't about signaling mechanics. Okay, they had 90+% signaling, the miners. That doesn't matter. It's the fact that you can't code your way around missing economic consensus. If the economy doesn't upgrade, you're just activating a split. Just one more time, like, if you can't, the lesson is that you cannot code your way around missing economic consensus. If the economy doesn't upgrade, you're just activating a split. That's the lesson. Again, that you can't just hash power your way into strong arming the network.
Right. Now, I am one of those people that thinks that this controversy is dragging the price down, but also, like, NASDAQ, S&P are near all-time highs, and Bitcoin is sitting here with a 50% drop. So something needs to be responsible for that, and I am putting some blame on this. Maybe it's not the only reason.
It's a tech stock. No, Tone. It's trading like a tech stock, right? Like Bitcoin. Yes, there's some stuff that's all-time high, right? But all the software stocks are down, just like Bitcoin.
Maybe I need to check I'm sure there's an ETF for the software specific.
Absolutely, there is,
I'm not going to debate this. So, look, Vortex and I are not going to agree on everything. There are going to be parts where him and I disagree. But the one thing we agree on the most is how dangerous this user-activated soft fork actually is. And that is the main purpose of this interview. So I think one of the biggest things that Mechanic is completely getting wrong about the user-activated soft fork, and I did watch the last couple of videos that he did, and I have some timestamps. We're not going to do it on this one. I'm going to do my own commentary to some of the things that he said, is that he does admit that he was mostly on the sidelines watching the last user-activated soft fork. And his biggest takeaway from the user-activated soft fork was that a small minority of node runners forced the big bad miners to capitulate, and that miners are slaves of the node runners. And I think that's a misconception as to how it went down. It was a battle between all economic nodes. And this is where I sent a tweet out recently. Let me see if I can find it right here. Is that the takeaway that Mechanic has is that one node equals one vote or one signal, when in reality, one signal is the weight of your node's economic value. And even the amount of Bitcoin you're holding is economic value, because that is what will drive the futures market, which you were the one that pointed out the website of the futures market, which I showed on my last episode with Jimmy Song. And I think that this means like 2,000 more people saw it. And you can see the futures market has already dropped by 50% since that episode between Jimmy and I 2 days ago, right? So this is economic value. So this futures market right here, right, This is the economic value represented by the node runners with their Bitcoin stash, putting their money where their mouth is. Then you have the mining hash rate, and the mining hash rate will follow the economic nodes, not a bunch of pleb nodes on Twitter. And then finally, the most important part of the economic nodes are the businesses that are fully on Bitcoin. Like people are giving me shit when me and Shinobi and like Mr. Hodel we recently started saying, and I started saying it independently on my own. I actually think I said it before them, that your node doesn't. I mean, I should say your node doesn't matter as much as you think. Not that your node doesn't matter. Your node always matters, especially when you're validating your own transactions coming into you. But if your only usefulness to the Bitcoin ecosystem is hodling Bitcoin, your node doesn't actually matter. The vote of that node is actually irrelevant. The vote of Coinbase's node is very relevant. And that's why there was even that New York agreement. Like we needed, people needed to get into that room. But this is also where I disagreed with Jimmy Song, because he thinks that the New York agreement is what swayed like all of those economic nodes to adopt SegWit. And then there was a promise to fork the chain into a bigger block. But by then, I think anyone who thought that the chain would be forked into a bigger block would have been a total dumbass. Like by then, it was obvious we're not going to hard fork the chain. So maybe all of these economic nodes were pretending like, hey, we know we have to adopt SegWit, but we don't want to look bad because we've been on this, we're going to double the size of the blockchain train for like a year. How do we save face? Let's just, maybe they agreed to it in order to save face, but they all knew that the blocks are not going to get bigger. Like eventually the economic nodes had to do it because they finally understood that this is the future of Bitcoin and it's better for Bitcoin. Your thoughts on all that?
Yeah, I got a lot to say. So thanks, Tone. I agree with definitely most of that. First off, the link that you showed there was prediction market, not a future market. There's several.
It's the same thing, though.
Not quite, and I'll go into that. So basically, these prediction markets are going to come before the futures markets, because once these prediction markets start heating up with liquidity, the exchanges are going to want a piece of that, just like they did before. And it's important for people to remember that BitMEX did futures on all three of these forks. They did futures on SegWit 2x, they did a futures on Bitcoin Cash, and they did a futures on Bitcoin Unlimited. And in all three cases, they refused to change the original BTC ticker to anything other than the original core Bitcoin.
Legacy chain.
Legacy chain.
They refer to it as legacy chain.
Legacy chain. And they refused to follow the hash power, no matter how powerful it was, if it was 90+% signaling, because the futures markets there determined the value. So let me say this. Futures markets are extremely important in fork wars because they let the free market price both sides of the split with real money at stake. Otherwise, like Tone said, it's just Twitter polls and everybody yelling at each other. Okay, miners are not mercenaries. They are martyrs. History shows miners are mercenaries, not martyrs. Okay, history shows that hash rate, like Tone said, follows price. It doesn't dictate it. The SegWit 2x, again, lesson isn't about signaling mechanics. It's that you can't code your way around economic incentives. So again, we saw this happen before, that the futures market, first the prediction markets here now, and then eventually the futures markets will come along. And when that happens, certain things will have to go into place. We'll talk a bit more about that, Tone, like with replay protection and things like that. A lot of this stuff is unknown. And that's part of the danger of this 110 soft fork, is because they think it's just a soft fork, just an innocent little soft fork. But no, they're changing consensus level rules. We're literally removing opcodes. You are not going to get the buy-in of 100% of the network for those things. They just cause too much disruption. And I can go into more detail about that as well. But that's my thoughts on that, Tone. It's the futures markets that actually determined the reason for the miners eventually capitulating to SegWit via BIP110.
People are laughing, saying that Tone thinks he affected this prediction market. Well, let's see. It was steady at 14 to 15 cents on the dollar for like 5 days. And then I pull it up on our stream with Jimmy that a few thousand people have watched, and suddenly within 24 hours it drops 50%. Yeah, I'm gonna take some because I don't think there was more than 2,000 people are even using this. So yes, I am gonna say that it had something to do with it because now more people are aware of it. That's how
Absolutely.
things
And these
work.
prediction markets, they're not super liquid yet. Like it's very, it's early. Like we got all the way till September to grow. So yes, it's very possible that Tone's show absolutely affected this price because there's just less than like 10,000 people there, or
Right.
maybe less than that are currently betting on these particular prediction markets. But again, that liquidity will grow. That order book will grow as more and more people start to pay attention to this as we get closer to September.
All right, so now that we've talked about the history a little bit of the user-activated soft fork, oh no, there's one more follow-up I want to say. So you mentioned that, hey, the move that Garzik was going to do was he was going to take control of the repo and take over code development with his, massive bug that would have literally shut Bitcoin down. And I remember I mentioned it on last show with Jimmy. I was so angry at Garzik when this was happening in real time that I said some things on live streams that I probably regret. That's how angry I was at Garzik at the time. Now, this time around, they're not trying to do that. But I am of the position that if this fork goes through, and maybe we should save this more for the end, I am of the position that, and I have a tweet on that as well. Let me pull that up, actually. Here. This is the tweet I'm referring to, where the last user-activated soft fork of 2017, like the big one, right? We can debate whether Taproot was a user-activated soft fork as well. Is that soft fork was basically pushing through the work of the core developers. It was acknowledging the work of the core developers. The Bitcoin community was in a somewhat consensus that SegWit is a good thing. And the core developers were hesitant. Like, no. We don't want to force it on the network. Let's not force it. And the users were like, no, Bitmain will never accept it because of ASIC boost and ant bleed. And like they're too powerful. They'll never accept it. We have to force your changes on. And no core developer was going to quit over the fact that the users did something that core developers coded. This time around, it's completely different. This is what I was trying to explain to Jimmy. This time around, the user-activated soft fork rolls back the changes that core development has done. So not only does core development constantly warn users, don't UASF, it is dangerous. But this time around, the UASF rolls back their multi-year effort on many, many changes. And I don't see how a core developer that has respect for himself is going to continue coding for a paycheck from Chaincode Labs on Bitcoin when his views got rolled back. And Jimmy seems to think this is a crazy opinion. Your thoughts on this opinion?
So I don't think it's a crazy opinion. I think that at first glance that might appear to be the case, but you have to understand that a lot of these developers don't even get paid. Yes, there's some on these Chaincode Labs, but they do this for the love of the open source protocol. They do this for the love of it, most of them, So and even the ones that are getting paid, they could all get much higher paying jobs than Chaincode Labs at Silicon Valley companies. They could all get way more high-paying jobs right now, any day of the week on any of the coasts than Chaincode Labs. Chaincode Labs is not paying these people millions of dollars. They're paying them open source salaries, which everybody in the development industry knows is much cheaper than corporate development salaries. So first of all, let's just get that out of the way. Second of all, I think, in my opinion, like let's say this actually did, get actually activated. I don't think the core developers would quit. I think maybe a couple of them, might get upset or things like that. But at the end of the day, they're stewards of the protocol and they want to make the network good. They want to make it healthy and they want to make it useful for people. So if, in fact, a majority of the network did successfully roll back these changes, and it is of my opinion that they would then have to respond to that in some way, whether that's accepting it or, maybe even completely rejecting it, right? And making it fork off, whatever it is, they're going to respond to it in a way that's that's consistent with what they've done in the past. And so, in my opinion, I don't see them like getting upset if this passes or quitting or anything like that. They'll just have to sort of reorganize how they look at Bitcoin and how they think about Bitcoin. But to all of Core, I don't want to speak for Core, but for me, to most of Core, from what I've seen, they agree that Bitcoin needs to remain a neutral ledger, and anything that is going to prevent that, they're probably going to not be okay with.
Right. Well, we can't speak for Core. That's the thing, right? People are calling me a Core shill. I don't even like Core all that much. I am very critical of Core. Vortex and I disagree on it a little bit. You're way more pro Core than I am, and
that's a political term. That's a political term, pro Core. What I am is I'm pro Bitcoin. I'm pro healthy network, right? I'm pro freedom money. And so all I do is I look at the history of what Bitcoin Core has done and all of the code that they've written and all the things that they've done over the years. And all of that I am good with, save for maybe one couple little things. If you have any idea, Tone, how hard it is to work on this software, one of the most challenging software development projects on the planet.
No, I know.
You would look at
I know. We should not even attempted to look at the code.
Right. You would go back and you would see all of the stuff that they have done, like increasing, efficiencies 1,000-fold, like when it comes to things like, initial blockchain download, block propagation. So there's so many things that they've done with the protocol over the past 10 years that for me to go and be like, oh, they did one or two little things wrong. Oh man, I hate them. See, it's not, so I don't have that reaction, and I definitely don't have a pro Core stance. Again, I'm just looking at the code. I'm looking at 110's code. I'm looking at what it does. I'm looking at all of the code that was written before that. I'm looking at the things that 110 breaks and the difficulties that it's going to make for your average node runner and your average pleb just holding Bitcoin.
So, just a quick follow-up. So, just to make my case one more time that I think a lot of Core developers will quit because also like yourself and Jimmy, you are looking at it a little more of you are a Core developer and looking to do what's good for the protocol. But look what's happening. Like this mob on Twitter is now like wants your head, right? They're so happy they got Gloria Zhao fired. Like I was never a huge fan of Gloria Zhao. I thought that maybe making her a maintainer was a little bit anyway. I don't think that was the best decision by Core. But at the same time as not only their work getting rolled back, they're also being demonized to shit as all have attended, Epstein's Island. So you add those two things together, and I can see many Core developers just saying, fuck it.
I think we're giving a little bit too much credit to this thing actually activating and finding blocks, but that's definitely a valid, viewpoint to hold, Tone, that you think that some Core developers will leave. It's hard to object to that, because we don't know what their positions are. But in my opinion, I would say that maybe some might leave. But again, it's such a temporary thing, Tone, that and most of these developers think long term in decades. They don't think about, oh man, through September I'm going to get a lot of crap. No, that's why most of these devs remain anonymous as well, because of the blowback and think crazy things that can happen. And again, that's not been a problem because everything in Core so far has been a meritocracy. You don't get anywhere in Bitcoin Core to be a maintainer or anywhere higher up unless you prove yourself worthy, unless you contribute to the protocol and your contributions are deemed useful by the greater majority of developers. So, it's just going to be a temporary thing. And I think developers will continue working on Bitcoin despite this setback if it actually does become activated.
Right. So Gloria Zhao left about a week ago. Another Core developer resigned as of yesterday. I don't know if you saw.
Should have been an anon. She should have been anonymous. She should not have used her name. But
that's just my thing, right? So Vortex, here's my concern on the anonymous developers, right? So if there were anonymous developers in Core at this point, I would be more okay with it because Core has a lot of developers. Knots has one anonymous developer, and many of us think it's the same developer we know, which is Luke, pretending to be Data Ohm writing the code, right? And then someone is tweeting. So for me, the most obvious explanation is Luke is doing the coding of Data Ohm, and Chris Guida is doing the tweeting of Data And
So,
now Data is an extra developer, right? So just one last thought. My concern is if Knots becomes the dominant client and Knots has 8 anonymous developers and it grows to 20 anonymous developers, how do I know it's not still one developer?
yeah, so it's a great point, but and even Wirdum code was bringing this up to where if it does activate, yes, in fact, we will only have like a couple of people literally like maintaining certain consensus rules, and that's extremely bad centralization for the network. But remember that, in my opinion, anonymous developers aren't a bad thing because again, it's all about a meritocracy. What have you done? I don't care who you are, what your past is, what your name is, and if you've done all of this work on Bitcoin Core that is objectively useful and helpful to the network, to the protocol. So when you have, anonymous user developers aren't that much of a problem when there's a lot of them. When there's only one, well, that's the same problem as if it wasn't anonymous.
What has Data done, right? What has been the history of
exactly.
Data
Exactly.
Before Knots? Well,
exactly.
Has he existed?
Exactly. And that's the problem. See, with Core, the most transparent project on planet Earth, you can see everybody's contributions and how long they've been contributing and all of their comments on the GitHub and so on and so forth. You can actually track and see their work. How Luke works with Knots is a little bit different. There is literally no PR process whatsoever. It is just Luke pushing his code, force pushing his code to master whenever he feels like it. So we don't really have as much of a public record of what code is going into Knots and who actually peer reviewed it. We can see like the actual changes, but again, you'll see every single change is force push, force push, force push. Like there's no peer review. And that is the number one thing that we need Core for, is this public peer review process, this transparency that Core has strived to achieve and, in my opinion, has successfully done so.
So in this presentation that I did, that Jimmy really argued with me on, is I pointed out all of the Core developers. This was, of course, 10 years ago. And the more recent list of Core developers that coded is this list. And half of them were on that list from 10 years ago. And then you have your one and only Knots developer whose Twitter account was created in November of 2025. And that's probably when his GitHub account was also created in 2025.
So that's not enough time. That's not enough time to, even if he did have, let's say he had GitHub repo contributions for only a year. I would look at that as a developer and be like, that's not enough time. I would have to look and see, take case-by-case basis on what he actually coded, but that's not enough time for me to trust somebody to develop a software for a $2 trillion network. Like, that's not enough time, in my opinion.
Right, but there is, but there's like 3,000 cats on Twitter that think this is the way to go.
Again, that's Twitter.
Right.
That's why I go back to the future as being the absolute imperative to fork wars. Otherwise, it's just cats yelling on Twitter. We have to have an actual free market to be able to determine where people can actually put up economic value to find out which chain is more valuable or not.
So to close out this point, right, I literally just replied to, I can't believe I'm arguing with Bitcoin motorists. This is so frustrating. A friend of mine for over a decade. Say again?
It really is. It's really, really a shame about how Bitcoin motorist is acting. It's really, really shameful. Like, I was trying to give him the benefit of the doubt and have a discussion with him, and he was live quote tweeting. He was live quote tweeting our conversation to his audience with screenshots, so I couldn't even see that he was doing it, with all of these incorrect things, trying to trying to one-up me, I guess, to his audience to make it look like he wasn't getting absolutely destroyed in the comment sections. So yeah, and on Twitter, it was really bad look for him.
Here's my reply, right? He continues to say how evil Core is and how bad Core is. And he says, we're about the wallet files being deleted. And my reply was, him and Crater are the only ones that can't let that go, right? It was a bug.
It's a small bug that was fixed.
It was a bug that 100 code reviewers missed, right? It was a bug that no one cares about because 85% of all the wallets are still running it with the bug and have not updated their to version 30.2 that fixed the bug. That shows you how irrelevant it is. This also shows you how Core version 30 was one of the fastest adopted versions. And the reason it was so fast adopted is because of the Knots movement that was trying to undermine Core. So all of these people adopted version 30 prematurely. There is a reason why new versions of Core do not get adopted. It's not because people hate Core. It's because people don't want to, insert new code because they don't know what possible bugs that code can have. That's why Core version 30 is not being adopted very, very quickly. And this is also why if 100 good developers can miss a bug, what the hell is Data Ohm? The only freaking unknown anonymous developer that showed up 6 months ago is going to do for future upgrades with Knots when they're trying to fire Core. This is just so irrational.
Well, it's also hilarious.
It's insane.
It's hilarious. Some of the people in the comments are like, by that logic, Satoshi would be discarded. Again, guys, this is brain dead thinking. We're not saying that being anonymous.
Satoshi had a lot of bugs and a lot of mistakes. That's why that's why all these developers came to help him.
Yes. People need to understand that like Satoshi's first version of Bitcoin was not good. It was workable. And it's taken a great deal of effort over 10 years plus to be able to start to actually modulate it and bring it up to more modern standards. And Core continues to improve it. Core continues to do that. So we're not saying, at least I'm not saying anons are bad. I'm saying meritocracy is good. I don't care who you are, how long you've been developing, as long as I see what you've done. Now, when it comes to building a soft fork, I agree. I believe, in my opinion, that you need to have a lot more than 1 year's worth of development work proven on Bitcoin. But, that's for other people to judge. And the biggest point is that anon is not bad. Meritocracy is good.
All right. Let's move on to the next topic, which is ledger neutrality and the reasons for the op return removal. I think that you have a tweet on this somewhere. I should pull that up, but go ahead.
I got multiple tweets on this one, but
they're in the video description. I'm going to pull them up from the video description.
Cool. Yeah. And so basically, this is really, really an important point to take home, because without neutrality, you don't get permissionless. Without permissionless, you don't get censorship resistance. So by moving these standardist filters into consensus rules, Bitcoin ceases to be a neutral ledger and starts looking more like a curated platform. This sets a precedent where a 55% majority can decide that your validation is spam simply because they dislike the use case. See, Bitcoin is a network defined by its users who have ultimate freedom in choosing what software they use and not implementing whatever policies they desire. So, Bitcoin Core contributors they understand that they are not in a position to mandate what those are. That's why they removed the filter. They tried to mandate what those settings are, and everybody literally ignored them. This created a ton of malincentives that started centralizing the block space market. And what do I mean by that? So the block space market is essentially, how much it costs to get something in a block, right? This is important. This is what creates the mempool. This is important to keep this as public as possible. And yes, everybody has their own private mempool in their node. Yes, we understand this, but we're talking about public mempools, public nodes that people are actually showing the transactions, like you can go look at with mempool, right? You can go see all what's included in various blocks in mempool. And so on the mempool website, and shout out to the developer there, really, really, really great work on that website. But when you start creating backdoor channels where somebody is going to get blocks mined just by going to an actual private miner, that is where the mempool then becomes privatized and centralized and not public. We don't know if those transactions are what's in those transactions or what kind of transactions they are. All we know is that they're technically valid, even if they're non-standard. So if you want to get your non-standard transaction put in a block, you can go to these private miners like Slipstream, and Mara and F2Pool and others, and get your block mined. That is no bueno. We do not want that. That is centralizing the block space market. So it is important as possible to keep that block space market as decentralized as possible. Core recognized that this was happening. And many months later, like 20 months later, after Slipstream, they finally said, screw it, we're going to remove this filter because it's incentivizing people to go through these backdoor channels through miners, through their private APIs, and create this centralized block space market. We don't want that. Bitcoin is designed to be decentralized, designed to be censorship resistant, so that no matter what transaction that you want to put on the network, no matter what you want to buy with your Bitcoin, the network won't stop you from buying that. That's extremely, extremely important. I'll let you comment on that, Tone.
Well, no, any specific tweets you want to go more into depth on? So I have this one here. You can see it on your screen share.
Mm-hmm.
I have this one here.
That's the one I'm talking about here. This is an important one. Let's keep this one up. So again, this is important to understand because a lot of people like HODLNOT, try to say like Core has philosophically changed. They've had a philosophical change in their behavior, and something is different. Something is different with Core, and of course, that is not even close to the case. They're trying to say that Core broke some kind of social contract, but that is not correct. The social contract I'm referring to is this public mining pool, is the fact that we've all kind of publicly agreed to this agreement that we won't go to private mining pools. That agreement was broken in 2024 with Mara, F2Pool, and others when they created services like Slipstream. So again, Slipstream is a service to mine any consensus valid transaction for the right fee, bypassing normal mempool policy entirely. They were ignoring Knott's and Core's policies. And so Core had to respond by relaxing/removing that policy so that people can go back to using OpReturn instead of having to go through private channels, creating this private mempools, create all these fake UTXOs that clog up the network, making it more difficult for node runners.
So I think I should retweet this one. I'm just going to retweet my own reply only because I want people to read this conversation between Andit and AJ Towns. So right here, AJ tries to explain it to him, but I kind of summarized it in that when I wrote the OpReturn limit, it has become both useless and ineffective. And here's what I mean by that. It has become useless because no one was stuffing large amount of data. This is also the argument that the Knots people have. Why are you blowing up this OpReturn from 83 bytes to by 1,200 times? And now they're saying, but no one was using it. Why are you breaking something why are you fixing something that isn't broken? No, and that's also like the argument of people. No one is using these large OpReturns. Why are you now opening up the Komodo for using these large OpReturns? Well, that could be the reason. If no one is using if no one is paying for your, like these are the videos, right? Like I have educational trading videos, for example, right? If no one is paying for them, why don't I just open them up? Why don't I just share them for free? Like who cares at that point, right? If no one is using these large OpReturns, then where is the risk of actually removing the restriction that no one is using, no one cares about anyway? But if someone was to use a large OpReturn, these filters have become ineffective in doing so anyway. So this is why they're both useless and ineffective. But here's the but coming. Bitcoin Core would never be irresponsible enough to suggest a consensus change. So the best solution they had was to just remove the damn filter for both reasons. It is useless and ineffective. But they're not crazy enough to push for a user-activated soft fork but the Knots people are, and somehow that makes them the good guys and Core the bad guys.
It's really strange. If people did a little bit of research, they would see what's going on here. And basically, since Core's V30 has been released, we have seen more OpReturns being used. We've seen larger OpReturns being used, which is good. That's healthy for the network. That's good for the network. We're seeing fake UTXOs being reduced and larger OpReturns being used. That is good. And it also seems to people, I get this question all the time where people are like, why don't we just blow it up to be a gigabyte? What's this? Who cares? And it's like, guys, there has always been a block size limit. You have never encoded anything bigger than 1 megabyte anyway because of the block size limit. So removing this particular limit doesn't technically blow it open for unlimited. There's still the actual 1 megabyte limit. And so, like we're seeing after V30, the harm reduction has been actually happening. We've seen harm being reduced. We've seen less fake UTXOs, and we've seen more people use bigger operators. This is a good thing for the network.
Can you explain a little more and a little slower why we want people to use op return for their shit if they're going to put shit in the blockchain?
Well, so basically, we cannot. I'm going to say this a couple of times so people really get this. We cannot prevent arbitrary data from being embedded into transactions. We cannot prevent arbitrary data from being embedded into transactions. Because of that, there has to be a place to put it. We have to put it somewhere so that the network can efficiently process it, so that we can put the priority of actual money transactions ahead of any type of data. And that's already in place. That's already done. That's what op return is. Op return is the trash can. That's where you put the trash.
The hell?
Harmful to the network.
Vortex, you kind of like left the stream for a minute. I don't know if it was an internet connection or you clicked on something. Back up 3 sentences.
Yeah. So
after the trash can, like op return is a trash can.
op return is the trash can. Op return is the trash can. There has to be a place where the network can efficiently process it, because we have to prioritize actual financial transactions. That's how the network works. That's what's happening now. Op return is it can be pruned, and yes, you have to have all of the data for a full node, but the network itself is not only full nodes. You have to make it efficient as possible and give different levels. So you have their full relay that has to have all the data, and then there are nodes beneath that don't actually have to have all of the data. And so that helps make Bitcoin, the network itself, more efficient. And so when you have this trash can where the network understands that this is a trash can and to not prioritize it, that will create the network that will make a more healthy network for financial transactions. So it was because everybody believes that Bitcoin is money that this op return was created in the first place, so that people that use it for anything else will have a place to put it, and the rest of the network can ignore it. So you remove that limit, you create. What happens if you remove that limit? Well, guess what? Now you incentivize people to put large amounts of data in other more harmful, detrimental ways to the network. You encourage them to go and create fake UTXOs, to embed data into these, which makes running a node harder. And that data in those UTXOs cannot be pruned. So that means that even whether you're a full node or a regular node, you still have to process that data. And so that is what makes it more difficult for node runners. That's why the limit was removed, to make the network more efficient for harm reduction that was being taken place by people not using the op return.
Right. And again, this is the part where Core ended up in a really tight spot. They would never suggest a consensus change. That literally goes against everything they do, is to suggest a dangerous consensus change. And this was literally the best way they could mitigate the harm reduction, is to remove the op return limit. And the Nazis are using the fact that Core was too responsible to push for a consensus change to solve the spam problem. They're using it against Core as to how irresponsible they are. This is the 3D understanding that people just don't even want to try to comprehend.
And I try to tell people, like, look, Core and Knots tried to take a stand. They're like, Core needs to take a stand. Core tried to take a stand. Core and Knots tried to take a stand with their relay policies and failed. The entire network ignored them. That's why we have subsat summer. And it's so weird that people seem to ignore subsat summer. But look, the miners proved they weren't going to abide by the Core and Knots defaults with subset summer. When block space demand dropped so low that miners broke ranks and started accepting 0.1 sat per vbyte transactions, despite the defaults in both Core and Knots implementation. So this proves that trying to do it at the relay level failed. So now, guess what they want to do, the Knots people? They want to do it at the consensus level. And when you do shit at the consensus level, you risk a fork, which is exactly what 110 is going to do.
Have you seen this tweet from Johnny?
Let's see. I have not seen that.
Okay, it was this morning. You should read it.
But
He's responding to Hodlnaut, who doesn't understand this, what you just said.
well, we can read the tweet out loud.
Yeah, sure. So Hodlnaut is refusing to, he's ignoring the following thing that Johnny wrote. The downstream effect. Full RBF transactions were reliably relayed on the open network and mined before Core relayed them as standard. Transactions with fee rate below 1 set per byte were reliably relayed and mined on the open network before Core relayed them as a standard.
That was the
Large
subset.
op return output transactions were also started to get reliably relayed across the whole network and being mined on the network. So Core relay is now relaying them as a standard. Core is not leading the way into this shit. They're just following what is happening on the network and adjusting the default to fit what is already going on.
Responding to a new reality is how I like to phrase it. It's very simple because people are like, filters worked for all the way 10 years. Guys, this is an entirely different reality. We've never had miners ignore the defaults like this. We've never had a subsat summer before. And now we have. So now we know, we have the proof. Core understands that their filters don't work. People ignore them. This created malincentives that centralized the block space. So they released V30 as harm reduction 20 plus months later. They did not just blow open it for no reason, out of nowhere, on a whim. They didn't create any incentive for spammers to come. Spammers already came. Bitcoin is the incentive. Bitcoin is the thing that attracts everybody to it, not spam or anything else like that. So spammers were coming to Bitcoin. They were harming Bitcoin, despite Core trying to fix that with defaults, and not trying to fix that with these default values. But everybody ignored them anyway.
Right, because the simplest, not the simplest, right? Yes, the best solution is to change consensus rules, but it's also the most dangerous solution that you want to avoid at all costs.
Absolutely.
Now, we can go back in time, and I said this on the show with the last show with Jimmy. We can go back in time, and maybe we should reconsider some of the taproot changes. We can go further back in time if we could. If we had a time machine, we would go back in time and reconsider some of the taproot upgrades that led to this. We can go further back in time and debate whether segregated witness should have had a block size increase. At the time, this was a compromise to the big blockers to save them from themselves of forking off and continue, like some of them still believe BCH is Bitcoin. I'm actually going to go on a BCH podcast. I want the podcaster to reflect on the last 10 years, right? Like we were trying to save the big blockers, not Roger. Roger was too far gone, right? Roger was too far gone, but we were trying to save the people that were blindly following Roger into forking off the network. We will make a block size increase with SegWit. There you go. Did it save a few people? Probably not. It was, but in hindsight, that was probably a dangerous compromise. And the user activated soft fork itself was a dangerous precedent. It was a dangerous action and a dangerous precedent. And now, 10 years later, we can go back and debate whether the compromise to make a block size increase with witness data being possible was a mistake or not. Do you think that was a mistake? I'm leaning towards it being a mistake. Jimmy thought that it still wasn't. It's just some of the taproot stuff was a mistake.
So I still think we needed SegWit because we needed Lightning.
Let me say that more specifically. We needed to fix transaction malleability. That was what SegWit was two parts. It was a transaction malleability fix, which was a bug that some miners didn't want to fix because it gave them certain advantages. Miners also didn't want Bitcoin to scale. They wanted on-chain fees. right? They didn't want the Lightning Network, right? Because that takes away some of their profits if fees are going high. So the transaction malleability fix of SegWit to bring us Lightning was absolutely necessary. But the second part is debatable.
The block size increase. Absolutely. No, I agree. The block size increase is debatable. But there was no other way to get SegWit at the time. They demanded a block size increase, and so that's what we did. So now we got the block size increase plus the malleability fix. Now, like you said, one of those is debatable, one of those is not. So then we go to the UASF. Now that, again, in my opinion, was necessary. It was the last ditch effort that we had in order to prevent Bitcoin, the repo, from being taken over by Garzik and the New York Agreement. So there was no choice there. We had to UASF. Did it set a dangerous precedent? Absolutely. And as you've noted, Tone, several times to people, there were people back then that cited this from core that like, look, if you guys do this, this will open up a new attack vector in the future. And sure enough, it did with this UASF. Now, I do want to recap a couple things about this UTXO bloat and give it an email example, because a lot of people like to say, oh, well, how come the spam filter in my email works? So I want to respond to that. So basically, BIP110 and the opportune limit, BIP110 and removing the opportune limit incentivizes spammers to hide data inside fake addresses and UTXOs, like multisig encoded data. And while an opportune can be ignored by a regular lean node, right, a fake UTXO must be tracked by every node forever, creating a permanent burden on every node's RAM and SSD. So again, BIP110 intended to save nodes, but actually creates a more expensive permanent burden on them. So let me go with the email analogy now. Somebody was like, hey, how come spam in my email gets removed by a filter? Look, the spam analogy that you people keep trying to send me kind of actually proves my point, because imagine if your email provider filtered spam by forcing the sender to hide the email inside your actual bank statements. Now you can't delete the spam without deleting your financial records. That's exactly what's happening when you block opportune. People don't stop. They hide their data in fake UTXOs that stay in every node's RAM SSD forever, and you can't delete them because the node thinks that they are spendable. See, yes, 37% of the chain in the last 5 years has spam on it. But again, there were market conditions that helped this and led to this. And these same market conditions are why why there's barely any spam today, why transactions are extremely cheap, because the market left NFTs behind. The market left most of this crap behind. There's still a small amount of people doing it, but it's never going to cause a 37% increase like it did over the last 5 years. Those days are done. The chain is, and even with that 37%, the chain is still growing at a normal rate, the rate that it was designed to grow. But people seem to conflate different metrics like UTXO set size and like the actual blockchain size and the UTXO size and all these things. But what's important, at least relevant for the opportune, is the UTXO count, because that growth was explosive through 23 and 24, right? But it has clearly plateaued, and that's exactly the policy change aimed to achieve, to incentivize data embedders to use opportune instead of inscription methods that create fake UTXOs, because opportune, again, is the spam folder, and people are using it more now, which is a good thing for the network health and giving fees to miners to secure the network.
Right. Very well said. And yeah, and like these NFTs and these inscriptions and runes and stamps, and that's all I can remember to name, because I've never actually used any of them or seen any of them. They're proving to the world how irrelevant they are, and they're going to go away. And something new is going to show up. Some new fad is going to show up. And this consensus change will not stop that new fad. Real quick, my analogy with the spam is, this is where that crazy CSAM argument comes in, right? So with the big op return, yes, I get a lot of spam. Most of it is in the spam folder. Some of it sneaks through into my main folder. You know what I don't do? I don't click on random links in emails that I consider spam, whether they are in my spam folder or not. So I have no idea if there is illicit material in my email box, because I don't go looking for it. And I would love to see, I don't think there's ever been a court case for you unknowingly getting an email with, illicit material, and somehow you're liable for that. So this whole CSAM argument is insane.
It's very, very strange, but people seem to conflate network operations for possession. They are completely, completely different, like under the law, like completely, completely different. So the network has nodes that sync data to the chain. They're not explicitly going out and looking at specific UTXOs. They're simply doing a network operation. That is never ever going to hold up in court as being as anything illegal. That's how the internet works, is nodes and relaying information throughout the internet. That is all a Bitcoin node is. That's why no matter what you do, you can never make some of these dark web nodes illegal. You can't, because you can just run a node. It's not illegal to run a node. It's illegal to host software, not run a node. And having a node with the blockchain data set is not hosting software. You're not hosting software. You're actually just hosting text. And even then, you're not hosting anything. You're not hosting anything. You're serving information to the network itself, not to any individual user or any specific user for any specific reason or any specific data type. No, you're syncing your node with the rest of the chain. And that is in no way ever going to be illegal.
All right, so it's time to move on to the next topic, which is this tweet from you. Let's talk about the risks of the user-activated soft fork BIP110 and everything that it potentially breaks, with highlight on Miniscript, and maybe explain what that is.
Sure. So let me just get my notes here, because I got a lot of stuff that I want to say on this too. So basically,
I think I have it on screen share. Let me make sure everyone can see it, and they can. Okay.
Yeah, that's a great post, and this is the post that people should look at and post in their private chat rooms, if they will, for people to discuss.
Link in the description. Link to this is in the description. I may not have everything that I've been showing linked in the description, but this is
probably the most important one, because this kind of gets to the gist of all the issues that that 1110 actually has. So first of all, I want to say that basically 1110 effectively ends up being anti-scaling, because it kills a lot of upgrades that Bitcoin was working on. Miniscript is one of them, which I'll get to in a second. But LN symmetry is something I want to talk about really quick, because LN symmetry is a pretty important upgrade for Bitcoin's Lightning Network that dramatically reduces the need for constant watchtower monitoring, enabling simpler multi-party channels. Because Lightning is kind of like, it's an always-on thing. You have to always be checking your connection to the other side. So its main implementation right now, LN symmetry, uses the Taproot Annex, which is explicitly disabled in 110. So what the Taproot Annex is it was deliberately designed into BIP 341 by Peter Woolley, however you want to pronounce that, as like a place to facilitate new features. So basically what disabling this does is it kills a bunch of different upgrade paths, including LN symmetry and the path to channel factories. Because LN symmetry's biggest promise is making multi-party channels with three or more participants practical, which is basically widely considered the most viable path to scaling Lightning Network to billions of users. So in other words, it kills the industry's best hope for a Lightning Network that dramatically reduces the need for constant watchtower monitoring. This is not a theory. There are several working versions of LN symmetry today in various testnets, using various different actual opcodes. But it is possible, and there are people that want this to happen. And one of those people is me, because LN symmetry, again, is kind of one of our best hopes for really getting the Lightning Network scalable to billions of users. Another thing it does is the Miniscript. So we can get into the Miniscript stuff now. And that's really, really important, because that has to do with vaults. So let me just get to my notes here. Basically, Miniscript itself, like, it took 3+ years to get anywhere. Like, it's pretty much the industry standard for writing readable, secure smart contracts. Like, this is clearly the direction the entire industry is moving. Being used for things like inheritance, multi-party escrow, and other various time-locked recovery things. Like, all of this relies heavily on the op-if operation to branch between conditions. And 110 disables this, effectively breaking Taproot-based custody setups. So anything using an op-if, basically anything using an op-if with Miniscript is now broken. This basically kind of welds shut like any emergency exits for vaults. That basically effectively confiscates the funds for the duration of the fork. Even 110's own FAQ, frequently asked questions, admits that it affects wallets using miniscript. Now, if you're a programmer, just imagine banning the if statement. Like, you could just use the case statement. You could use a million different ways. If you just ban the if statement, it's absolutely pointless. Like, the point is that there is a million ways to get around things. And if you're not a programmer, then just like understand that this has the op-if is a very, very, very basic building block. It's been a very, very basic building block for building safe Bitcoin wallets and safe Bitcoin vaults. Like, so you removed it, it's not good. This has a big engineering cost because it has costs on the miniscript engine devs, the devs that implemented across wallets and libraries like Rust miniscript, and of course all the users of this software that these wallets, like I mentioned earlier, use. So and this 2-week window is nowhere near enough time for users to be prepared. Like, they may be impacted without knowing and potentially losing coins just for using good wallet software. So as Gregory Maxwell noted, Bitcoin doesn't really have a global state of pre-signed transactions. So if a user actually has a multi-year inheritance plan set up with emergency vault exits, and they use op-if statements, guess what? Gone. The funds are effectively confiscated for the duration of the fork. So that is just really, really, really bad. And it actually goes further than that too, because it also disrupts BitVM stuff. It kind of lobotomizes BitVM. Now, BitVM is going to be pretty important into the future, in my opinion, for certain things, not for everything, but just for certain things. So BitVM is one of the very few viable paths that we have to trustless layer 2 bridges. And a trustless layer 2 bridge are basically verification systems that prove off-chain data, right? Prove off-chain computation has happened correctly on-chain. And these are used for moving things between the main chain and layer 2s and side chains and federations and all sorts of cool stuff that all makes Bitcoin a better money. So very important for building trustless systems using Bitcoin. And again, 110 lobotomizes it, meaning it makes it much less useful because BitVM, in order really to work well, it requires deep taproot trees to verify all this computation. And you're only going to get roughly 7 levels deep or so with when you lobotomize it. And BitVM to really work well requires thousands of leaves to function in real world scenarios. So it blocks that. And what's crazy is that it blocks something further. It also blocks op success. These opcodes are literally undefined. It's crazy. It blocks future upgrade paths that were all designed to use this for years in the future. So it absolutely kills future upgrade hooks entirely.
You done?
That's kind of the most what I want to say. Yeah.
You sure?
Yeah. At least for that particular subject, and I'll have you respond, and of course I'll probably respond to that.
No. See, this is where having Jimmy Song on the show is very useful, because I do not have the technical capabilities to challenge you on what you wrote in this text, right? So because I don't have the technical capability of challenging you on anything you wrote, I'm going to have to try and review the comments or bring on a technical expert that would challenge this. But Luke, who else is there from the dot side, right? Data Ohm is an anonymous dev that showed up 3 days ago that we think is Luke. And who else? There are no technical experts. Yes, there might be a few people that will, code and make upgrades going forward. Because remember, there is a temporary component to this. Hodlnaut recently discovered that, well, in 1 year, all this shit just, we do this again. We're going to perpetually soft fork. And if 1 year is too long, maybe they'll soft fork every week, right? Remember, this is the Ethereum plan. And this is what Monero did. Monero was like, oh, we're just going to hard fork every month to make sure that, no one takes over our protocol. And Ethereum is like, well, we're just going to fork it every time to make sure, right? This is the danger of this soft fork, is that it requires all future upgrades to be soft forks.
It's absolutely insane. It activates a crap load of code including literally removing opcodes and it's a 55% signaling limit, which absolutely guarantees a split. Like this is so far of a radical departure between Bitcoin's previous upgrades. They upgraded code that was worked on for years and then had a 90+% consensus model. Like there's what they're doing is incredibly irresponsible. If this rushed emergency consensus changes become normalized, like that governance precedent is permanent. Like you say, even if the technical changes expire. So, like, in other words, 55% is just a recipe for a split. It is not a guarantee of unity. Bitcoin is a voluntary system, meaning you cannot, like I said before, you cannot hash power your way into forcing an economic consensus that doesn't exist.
So Giacomo had a pretty good post. Remember, when we interviewed Giacomo, he was a lot more neutral. And in the beginning, he was pretty pro-knots. And right here, this was a great tweet by Giacomo. In order of importance, here's what he disagrees with, because he is anti BIP110 soft fork. And here's his list in order: splitting the chain with controversial consensus forks, creating disruption that can cost people money. And you just explained how it can cost people money. Using something as static as consensus rules to tackle something as dynamic as spam. And again, this is the part that I just said. Now you're going to need perpetual soft forks for something as dynamic as spam? How often, right? Reacting to an imaginary CSAM emergency due to V30, which doesn't actually exist. We talked about it earlier. This is just like if someone sent you a CSAM link to your Gmail that ended up in your spam, and somehow you are liable now for a spam email that is sitting there in your Gmail spam with a link to look at CSAM. This is literally the argument that they're making.
Yeah, like I said, it doesn't hold up in court. It doesn't hold up in any technical sense. It doesn't even hold up in a logical sense. It just makes no sense. It is absolutely a manufactured fake emergency from Luke and Mechanic. Again, they have good intentions, I'm sure. Like they think that this might just kill Bitcoin. So of course they're going to react in that way. But unfortunately, they're just like Roger, incredibly misguided. And like Roger, they've tied their entire identity to this. So now that if it fails, they can't let it fail. They will have to save face somehow. And that's probably going to involve a hard fork.
I hope it does. I really hope it does. I hope they turn it into a hard fork, or a hard fork is forced onto them, which could also happen. Entertaining the idea that legal risk should be mitigated by code changes, which is a terrible precedent in Bitcoin. That kind of goes with the prior one as well. Mixing all these things above in a confused and inconsistent way, it's an emergency move due to CSAM in op return in V30. But then again, it changed consensus to limit unrelated things that were perfectly valid before V30. This is the rollback feature of other shit, okay? And to me, this is what this is saying to me, and this was me replying to something Ugly Old Goat wrote. This is how I see the knots movement. Okay, it's a small centralized group that decides what is and what isn't an acceptable Bitcoin transaction. They're trying to frame it as we know what spam is. I'm framing it the other way. You are now deciding what is and isn't a Bitcoin transaction. Okay, this small centralized team with one guy coding is now wants to become the new dominant client, and they have a vocal army of animal pictures running a node in a box and enforcing this centralized code without even knowing why they are running a node. This is where, again, myself, Shinobi, and several others are now being demonized for trying to educate people that you need to understand why running a node. Just running a node is not what's helping the Bitcoin network. The Bitcoin network is helped when you understand all the reasons to run a node. And the more resilient, full listening nodes we have, the better. And if you're scared because of a link to CSAM in your Gmail spam folder, then you're not a node I care about on a network at all.
Yeah, and so I have a tweet on this too that I just DM'd you in Twitter, and I'll read as well. Let me find it again here.
Let me
Basically,
pull it up. I'm just not going
yeah.
to pull up my DMs on Twitter on this
Oh,
monitor. I have another monitor.
okay, great.
I'm going to grab your tweet.
Yeah, we'll bring that up, and then I would like that read too, because it really summarizes my viewpoint on this whole thing. So, and if you want to read it, or I can read it, but I'll read it since you read yours. Basically, yeah, basically like, and I have another tweet that you can open in a new tab there as well.
Mm-hmm.
But you might have.
I'll open it after.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but basically, it seems that people seem to conflate again this infrastructure operation to personal possession. Okay, they are treated completely different under the law. Bitcoin's blockchain only holds transactional data, strings of text. To view it as anything else requires third-party software that has nothing to do with Bitcoin or running a Bitcoin node. And a node automatically syncing blockchain data has no knowledge of the embedded content anyway. And even if it did, the blockchain itself is immutable. It's pretty simple, guys. Like, look, Bitcoin must remain this neutral ledger, which means validating consensus rules, not judging what's inside the transactions. Because if it follows the rules and pays the fee, it should be valid. That's literally the entire point of a permissionless and censorship-resistant network. That is some of the most important points of Bitcoin for me and Tone, that and unconfiscatability, which you only get if it's permissionless and censorship-resistant. So hear me now, guys. The moment we introduce this type of subjective content filtering at the protocol level, at the consensus level, we have created a mechanism for centralized control over what transactions are actually acceptable, which is literally the exact thing Bitcoin was designed to make impossible.
All right, and now I'll click on your other tweet. Oh, I think I showed this earlier
yeah,
already.
You can see from here that the chain is growing at a normal rate. You know, the fake UTXOs have been reduced. V30 has been harm reduction as it was designed to be.
People are asking what I mean by resilient node. God, how many times did I explain it? A resilient node is a node whose owner is not scared of an email in their spam Gmail with a link to CSAM, right? The person that is scared for an email in his spam folder that he doesn't even know it's there, right? But you're scared. Why do you have Gmail? If you are scared of emails in your spam folder with links to CSAM, you should get off email. You should not have an email account, right? This is the person that is a scared node. So get off the node. Don't run a node. It's that simple. It's really that simple.
Yep. And it's crazy. Like some of these responses, you know, that people have like on the other side, they just have like one word responses, non-technical responses like, get off the bong. Like just absolutely useless responses that, you know, any technical person would just completely disregard because it has no substance whatsoever. So be careful who you're following. Be careful who you're listening to. Try to only listen to people who actually sound like they know what the hell they're talking about, using actual technical data, using actual historical facts, and not, emotional means, not, manipulative words. It's important. It's really in this day and age, in the information age, it's more important than ever to know and understand who you are following and where you're getting your information from. It's extremely important.
Yep. All right. I wanted to that's this email. Sorry. I wanted to bring up one more on this topic and then we will be moving on. I couldn't believe this, man. I just saw it. Nick Szabo actually said that Core should have ran Core V30 past their lawyers before releasing it. How insane is this? Like this alone made me lose like so much respect for Nick Szabo. I kept saying I would love to bring on Nick Szabo as a technical expert to explain why he's pro or not. And then when I saw this, I'm like, nope, all respect gone.
Yeah, this is fiat thinking, right? This is fiat thinking. This is lawfare. This is the old traditional system. This is precisely what Bitcoin developers don't give an F about. You can. This is why Bitcoin is FU money. You can shove your lawyers up your ass because we don't care. Bitcoin is censorship resistant. Bitcoin is permissionless. Bitcoin is fuck you money. You don't get to tell me how I get to use my Bitcoin. You don't get to tell me when I get to spend my Bitcoin, and you don't get to freeze my Bitcoin because you don't like how I'm using it.
Yep. Oh, here it is. In this section of why it's dangerous, I have a tweet from Wicked trying to see what this tweet was. Oh, okay, that's the tweet I added on to. Okay, so we already kind of showed that, right? So this is okay, good. So let's move on to. We got a few more topics to cover. We have 30 more minutes with Vortex. So on my list, you mentioned anti-scaling already. Incentivizes centralizing block space market. Did we talk about that yet?
Yep, we did already. So I think we're pretty much going to
and you talked about UTSO bloat. We talked about the rush timeline.
Well, I do want to get into a little bit more of the timeline and replay protection stuff, if that's all right.
Oh yeah, okay. So and let me just go through the other topics. Yeah, we already talked about how this doesn't solve the problem. We already talked about the historical precedent with the block size stuff. So yeah, the only thing that's left is, what do we think about going forward? Well, like what happens? We already talked about the backwards. We talked about 2017 and why this is being completely like the lessons from 2017 are, the wrong lessons were learned by the people pushing this. Oh, and by the way, I learned something on a podcast with Johnny Bear of BitMEX Research and Block Size Wars, is that one of the reasons the op return limit was put in the first place is because Luke was abusing op return with like Bible verses or something.
That's correct. That is the historical fact that we can find from both first count experiences and on the forums.
Man, so Luke Dash is all over this thing forever, right? So he's the reason why the op return limit was put in. He's now the reason why this op return limit is like the biggest controversy in 5 years of anything Bitcoin's done. In addition, it was I heard the other day, it was his pool Allegius that was mining the first spam transactions and was happy to do it. And he's the one that made the first user-activated soft fork a reality, pushing for it, that the core developers really didn't like. I mean, they were happy that someone was able to make SegWit a soft fork instead of a hard fork, which they originally thought they may have to hard fork to fix transaction malleability. It was Luke that found a way to make it a soft fork. But again, the concern was, well, these soft forks would be a very, very dangerous way if a small, misguided group of people now try to coerce the network, and it's happening. Like Luke's fingerprint is all over everything. So, the moment he forks off into another token, that's it, right? Like he would go off into obscurity, and all the good and the bad. Well, again, we go back to the bell curve, right? Well, like you lose some of the good, his ability to actually understand the code and help, make future code, with the bad of constantly trying to, change consensus rules, which he's now been trying to do for 10 years to make the blocks smaller. And while there's some merit to making the blocks smaller, the problem is it doesn't matter if you're making the blocks smaller or bigger. Like, consensus changes are bad.
Yep, they're difficult because, again, it requires coordination across the entire industry. Wallets, exchanges, it's absolutely insane. Developers, node runners, the entire ecosystem. And so they're now having to put the entire ecosystem through all of this work, through all this research, through all of this BS. And so each time they try to do this, it will have less of an impact. So if they do try to do it again, it will have less of an impact than this one does, because this is their first time. Again, this is a little bit different than anything we've had before. So it will serve as a lesson. It will serve as a lesson for us all, even you, even me, Tone, even the OGs, even everybody, to figure out further, how people view Bitcoin. But right now they're saying the 110 side is basically saying there's absolutely no risk There is no problem. Your coins will be 100% okay. I got Hodlnaut out there replying to people's tweets saying your coins are 100% safe. Don't worry about anything. Keep on spending. And that's absolutely insane. So I want to talk a bit about this replay protection. See, before
Yes.
the BCH transition was pretty smooth because they eventually implemented replay protection. This, that's that SIG hash fork ID flag, right? That made the transactions invalid on the other chain. So you could freely spend, no problem. Meaning replay protection, meaning with replay protection, you could spend on one chain without having it being replayed on the other. However, this is important. The concern with 110 is that there's going to be no guarantee either side would implement replay protection. Because remember, it's kind of like a game of chicken. Like nobody wants, as soon as you implement that change, you are no longer the real Bitcoin. So now it becomes extremely political and a game of chicken. And again, it's absolutely insane.
That statement is a little debatable, right? The moment you implement replay protection, you're no longer the real Bitcoin. The real Bitcoin is the Bitcoin with the most hash rate and the most cumulative proof of work.
Right.
That is the real Bitcoin.
You're signifying that you're not BTC, essentially. Like if they did that, they would signify that they're not BTC.
Right. But in order to put in replay protection, you're putting a flag saying we are centralized because we have the ability to put in replay protection.
Exactly.
And that removes confidence from your chain being decentralized, hence incentivizing the miners and the economic nodes. And I'm not explaining what an economic node is again to you people.
So technically, you're going to be okay if you hold your coins, but if you start trying to spend your coins during this freaking ridiculous time period in September, you could absolutely lose everything.
Right. So that's the thing. So what happens is whoever puts in the replay protection is waving the flag that they have a lot of control and centralization of the code. And this is why Core will never put in replay protection. Core will go down with the ship, okay? And if BIP110 captures the majority of the hash power, then they do become the real Bitcoin. Now, in order to prevent this, because some of us, yourself, myself, Bitcoin and Chill, is it Bitcoin and Chill? Yeah, Bitcoin and Chill, Twitter Space, speakers like Shinobi, Hodl, Wicked, many others that see what's going on. A lot of these people might push for a URSF, user rejected soft fork. I am undecided if I would join the URSF movement because I think that the miners and the economic nodes need to stand up against a Twitter mob and say that is not what Bitcoin is going to be. And if they don't, then I would rather go down with the ship, just like Core will not be willing to put in replay protection. We will go down with the ship. I was willing to go down with the ship on URSF in 2017, and I will be willing to go down with this ship because if BIP110 and NOTs does capture the hash rate and they do become Bitcoin, Bitcoin will no longer be a decentralized project in my eyes. And I would treat it kind of like I treat Monero, which at the moment, here's how I treat Monero. If I ever need a confidential transaction, I would use Monero. I never have. I've never used Monero for anything, right? But if I was to use Monero, how would I use it? I would buy Monero, make the transaction, and not hold Monero because I don't trust Monero. It's not decentralized to me. It may have a use case that I have never needed because I think Bitcoin serves this use case. But Bitcoin was something special. Bitcoin was this decentralized ecosystem. And I will not have that kind of view of Bitcoin under BIP110. Now, maybe over time, they can bring me this confidence back, because when I first looked at Bitcoin in 2011, I didn't have confidence that it was this decentralized, unstoppable, unconfiscatable force. And that's why I didn't buy it in 2011, right? I didn't get into Bitcoin until I had confidence of what Bitcoin was. And all that confidence would be gone if BIP110 captures the majority of the hash rate. And maybe that confidence will come back. Maybe it'll come back in a week. Maybe it'll come back in a month. Maybe it'll come back in a year. Maybe it'll come back in 5 years. Or maybe it'll never come back. I have no idea.
Tone? Oh, I lost you there, Tone. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay,
I hear you now.
I lost you for a split second there.
Yeah, same. I think I lost internet connection. I was just saying
one word that I lost.
I was just saying it was very unlikely I would be on the URSF bus.
So my comment on that is, you have to remember how powerful the status quo is. We don't actually really need to stand up. Institutional players, economic nodes, they have zero appetite for this type of fork drama. So they're going to side with the default. It's what they did before. It's what they'll do. Again, it's the most logical way to do it. And when the futures markets come, because they will come, if this gets to a certain size, if 110 gets to a certain size of recognition, the futures markets will come and they will absolutely decimate the 110 chain. And everybody will be able to see that the 110 chain does not have the economic value. So I don't think that we need to do a USRF yet, or maybe possibly at all, because again, the standard is already core. We're already good. They're the challengers. And so I just don't think that they're even going to find that many blocks, if any at all. But I do agree with the centralization risk, like I talked before. If this did succeed, this would centralize block space. This would centralize certain consensus decisions. This would absolutely remove the neutrality that Bitcoin has enjoyed to this date. It will absolutely destroy it. And so I don't think the network wants that. And I think that the status quo is what is going to be observed coming this September.
So here's a comment. Would you ignore the longest chain? Well, I'm not going to be like the Bcash people, right? Thinking they're still the real Bitcoin. Would I ignore the longest chain? Well, I wouldn't have any value on the longest chain, right? It's not that I would be ignoring the longest chain. It's just that I would be ignoring it, but it's not like I'm going to be pushing another shitcoin, right? So I would ignore the longest chain the way I ignore, say, I don't know, uranium as an asset, right?
This is extremely nuanced, but extremely important because the BCH, they all use this longest chain fallacy on us as well. And so what we had to tell them, and what we'll tell the 110 folks, is the same thing. It's not just about the longest chain. It's about the longest valid chain, the longest chain that has the most economic value on it. So once again, it's not about the longest chain. It's about the longest valid chain, the longest chain with the most economic value on it. That is what the network, exchanges, and miners will follow. Not just pure hash rate. They'll follow the longest valid chain. And that's the chain I'll be following.
Here's some more comments. Complying with BIP110 could be less contentious for institutional players. No one knows how Mara or someone. Well, sure, it may be. I agree. Complying with BIP110 could be less contentious, but it could also be, and it will be, making Bitcoin a lot less decentralized. And something centralized is always way more compliant than something decentralized. Yes, I agree.
It's really simple. Like
making Bitcoin more centralized.
It's not. They have to understand that doing anything other than the default is more contentious than not. Doing anything other than the status quo is the contention. They are the contention. So supporting something that is contentious is not contentious. You're absolutely supporting a very small viewpoint of the network. If you say you openly support 110, you are supporting the contentious change. You are supporting the challengers change. You're not supporting the default status quo that is Bitcoin, that is going to end up being the longest valid chain. It's very important, very nuanced, but people need to understand the difference. That look, supporting 110 is extremely contentious, far more contentious than just doing the status quo.
All right, so Satwise, who I actually personally know, writes Bitcoin Core is centralized by BlackRock to incite this mayhem. That is factually incorrect. That is just factually incorrect on multiple levels. BlackRock has nothing to do with core development. And even if BlackRock was financing core development, these core developers are justifying technologically every move that they're making, and it makes technological sense. I mean, how else can I explain it? You have a better explanation?
No, that we don't have a better explanation. We've been explaining this thing to these people for years now, and they didn't get it, so now they're going to fork. So now we're going to continue to explain it until that fork happens. And when that fork fails, we'll continue explaining it more and why it failed.
So here's my concern. So here's the concern I brought up to Jimmy. By the way, this screenshot actually came from a Bcacher, and even the Bcache people are comparing and contrasting the current UASF movement from knots to their movement back in 2015, 16. You can't make this shit up. Okay, so where are we here?
We're about ready to wrap it up, I would say.
We are.
I do have a summary, just so you know. I have a summary that we can get to, and then
perfect.
I'll let you go.
Going into this soft fork, right? So, how do we see this playing out, right? Because I personally believe that early August is going to come. Anyone running BIP110 nodes is going to have to reject legacy nodes, legacy blocks. Anyone running BIP110 nodes will be rejecting legacy blocks. And when they realize they have no hash rate, they're going to have to cancel their movement, right? Now, I think that is the most likely outcome. That is the most likely outcome. That is also the most stable outcome for Bitcoin. As far as Bitcoin price, Bitcoin companies trying to scramble to figure out what's going on, Bitcoin miners having to make hard decisions. That is the most stable Bitcoin outcome. Is if this shit is canceled in early August when they realize they have no hash rate. But if that happens, none of these people are going to learn a lesson from them not getting any hash rate. They're going to still believe that they are right. They're going to regroup. They're going to recruit more like XRP people, and they're going to try again. Now, another scenario is they have some hash rate. Mechanics seems to think that even 10% hash rate gives them a good advantage that the rest will follow just because of 10%, because of game theory. So I think, unfortunately, the best case scenario is a 10 to 20% hash rate, with them kind of forking off the network, okay? And then lessons will actually be learned, because then they're going to lose some Bitcoin because they have no replay protection. Their blocks are going to get reorged. Well, actually, no, would they get reorged? They wouldn't get reorged. They just wouldn't be able to send their Bitcoin anywhere because no one would adopt it. They would end up having Bitcoin on both chains. They would start to realize that if they can't send their Bitcoin anywhere, they're going to try to send their Bitcoin somewhere. They're going to lose some Bitcoin trying to send it somewhere. And then maybe the lesson would be learned. The best lesson, however, if they end up putting in replay protection and force lowering the hash rate like Bcash did, and then they'll prove that they're centralized, and then they just fork off and call themselves MaxiCoin. I mean that would be the best case scenario, but I don't think they're willing to go all the way. They're not willing to be as diehard over their spam viewpoint as the big blockers were. I mean, they actually put their money where their mouth was, and I don't think these people are. Also, I don't think they have any money.
I definitely agree with a lot of that. So I'll give my prediction and then a summary, but and then we can wrap it up. But basically, the prediction is very similar to yours, Tone. I don't even believe that they're going to get a block. I don't even believe they'll have enough hash power to get a block. But and then they'll just get forked off the network. That's my prediction. But if they did somehow get some kind of hash power, and still lose, like you said, they're going to try to save face. So they're going to either try again, but it will have less impact because we've already seen them the first time, or they're going to completely fork off to MaxiCoin. That is basically the two things that that can happen. Again, my prediction is that it's going to be a nothing burger. They're not going to have enough hash, and even if they did, hash signaling doesn't, like I described before, doesn't actually mean anything. It's economic. That actually means things, right? It's economic nodes. It's the economy moving with you. It's not just signaling. So I believe that even if they did get some kind of signaling, the game theory is, to the mechanic's point, the game theory is not that, oh no, some people might be doing it, I better jump on. No, the game theory is freaking status quo, and that any other people trying to change things can F off. That is the status quo. That is what everybody has bought into over this past decade with Bitcoin. So that is the real game theory. So again, my prediction is that they're not going to see enough hash rate. They're going to get completely forked off the network. And if they, they're going to either come back with it, try again, or they're going to fork off to a completely different coin. It's pretty much that simple. And then you can respond to that, and then I have a summary.
No. I'm not gonna. No, we do want to wrap it up. I'm not gonna. I'll let you have that last word. There's no reason to respond. Here's a comment I really don't like. Anyone can hold both tokens until everything resolves. But do you realize you're not going to be able to transact in Bitcoin while everything resolves? This is the stupidity of it, right? Not everyone stacking sats. Not everyone in this world has a fiat job and stacks sats. Some people use Bitcoin every single day. And you expect these people to just sit there and do nothing. It's like saying, well, let's just have the internet go down for a month and then we'll just wait for it to come back, right? Or electricity, right? When your electricity... Oh, fuck. Oh, crap. Okay, I think my... Like, this is the thing that bothers me. Well, can't you just sit there and hold both chains? You won't be able to transact in Bitcoin. And if we have a 50-50 hash rate split, this could go on indefinitely. That Bitcoin is not usable until someone blinks and puts in replay protection. And it is not going to be core. I guarantee you it will not be core.
Absolutely. Yep, that's
this
a great
is
summary.
the danger. This is the danger of a soft fork versus a hard fork. Bitcoin becomes unusable while there's a debate. And what do you think happens to the price? You think the price is going to go up?
It's everybody has to deal with this. Exchanges, wallets, miners, the developers, the entire ecosystem has to deal with this. And so, to saying that, oh, everything's just going to be fine, we can just do it again as well. It's the amount of disruption being ignored is absolutely phenomenal. So we saw all this, what happened in 2017. Most of these 110 folks are class of 2021 or newer, so they have not experienced it yet, but they will. So I'll give my summary real quick and we can wrap it up, which is basically to summarize, like, BIP110 is dangerous. It's extremely dangerous. It was basically vibe coded and rushed out the door. It centralizes the block space market. It fundamentally breaks Bitcoin's promise of neutrality and censorship resistance, and doesn't even solve the problem it claims to solve. Peter Todd already uploaded an entire 110 proposal in a single transaction in a single 110 compliant transaction, proving it literally does nothing. It literally breaks the taproot tooling like Miniscript, vaults, and BitVM and LN symmetry that makes Bitcoin better as a money. Let me say that again. It literally breaks the very taproot tooling like Miniscript, vaults, BitVM, and LN symmetry that makes Bitcoin a better money. This sets the government precedent where 55% can ram through emergency consensus changes on a 3-month timeline, which again is a permanent scar to Bitcoin, a permanent change to Bitcoin, even if the technical rules expire. So the entire premise that fees were out of control, or that knots and core relay defaults meant anything at all was all disproven for everybody to see by Subsat Summer. Everybody can go and look this up and do the research and check it out. So those of you that are still in favor of 110, you are not protecting sound money. You are actually actively sabotaging its infrastructure to virtue signal about spam. Congratulations.
All right, that's a great way to end it. Guys, please follow Vortex on Twitter. I don't know how many, more podcasts he's going to go on. This may be the one and only. Him and I were both retired from covering Bitcoin, but this issue is too important that I wanted to be on the record. And I haven't really blocked or muted many people with BIP110 on their profiles, but in the probably next month, I'm going to start muting and possibly blocking everyone just so that in 3 years, when these people, are still there, I will know, how else do I tag them as, trying to attack and destroy Bitcoin other than by muting them or by blocking them. So this way there is a record that I stood up against these people. This is insane.
Yep. To me, I pretty much will reply to you, until you start using profanity or asking me if I'm paid or, or not responding to my technical responses with nonsense, right? With one single word replies. Those type of people, I'm sorry, I'm going to continue to block you because you are not helping the network. So I'm here to help the network, and I cannot have my time wasted by non-technical cats who have no idea what the hell they're talking about. So I will block your ass if you do not want to have an actual, real technical decision about the impact of 110.
Yep. And and keep in mind, Vortex and I, we've been independent content creators who've never had sponsors. And we're just doing it for the love of doing podcasts. And everyone keeps saying, I'm going to find out who's paying Tone to say this. I'm like, good luck. Let me know who that is. What do you do?
It's ridiculous. Like I said, we've been in Bitcoin since 2012, guys. We don't need to be paid. We're good. It's you guys that are screwed. It's the freaking Luke and Mechanic that's actually working off of VC money, not us. Luke and Mechanic are being paid. They are the ones using their VC money to push this 110. And it's not at any type of company level. It's just the simple fact that their salary is coming from Ocean, coming from VCs. So they are in effect indirectly being paid to push this 110 nonsense, not us. We are independent.
Yeah, by the way, I'm trolling everyone now because officially I don't hold any Bitcoin. And everyone is questioning why I have an opinion for having no Bitcoin. And I just reply to them, I have the same amount of Bitcoin as Luke-Jur does, right? And he's coding nuts. So I don't understand your point, right? This is half of my replies is reminding people that me having 0 Bitcoin is the same amount as Luke.
Love it.
I gotta find those.
That's a great place to end it, Tone.
Yeah, you'll see it in my replies. All right, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Follow Vortex on Twitter, and I don't know who the next guest is going to be or when, but I'm sure there will be. All right, see you all on the next one. Hey, Adam Back was watching us and retweeted.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Adam. Thanks, everybody.
Bye, guys.